Welcome to Culture on I24 News. I'm Yael Wisner-Levy. Thank you for being with us. Coming up today, we'll talk to the director of a documentary film about a Jewish settler rabbi who fought for peace. We'll take a look at an exhibit celebrating photojournalism in France and hear about the latest tragedy backstage on Broadway. ThirdWay is a new film telling the story of Rabbi Menachem Froman, an Israeli settler who actively sought dialogue and connection with the Palestinians and his philosophy and his followers. With me now in studio is the film's director, Harvey Stein. Harvey, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Yael.
And of course, your Impact producer, Aria Steinberg. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Harvey, can you tell us just a little bit about the film?
Well, I immigrated from the U.S., and about a couple years later, in 2008, I read about Rabbi Froman and went to visit him in Tekoa, his settlement, and I kind of fell in love with him. He's like my Jewish Zen master. It's the story of him and his disciples and the way that they kind of cut through ideology, not left-wing, not right-wing. They're amazing people, and they're still following in his tradition.
So when did you start documenting him?
December 2008, right after Obama was first elected, first time. Rabbi Froman was in love with Obama. He thought it was a miraculous occurrence.
Let's take a short look at a clip from the documentary.
You have to love your neighbor. And the Palestinians are my neighbors.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
I am a citizen of the state of God. My president is God. It's not so much important who is the man, who is the government.
Incredible. You know, people that live in the conflict or are living this region, you know, they see someone like this. It's so unique. It's a one-time kind of thing. And for viewers that are watching us now that aren't embedded in the conflict, it's also this kind of wonder. Who was the man?
He was a unique guy. He was a unique individual.
To say the least.
And he was always religious. He was a rabbi, of course, and somewhere along the way, from what I understand, way before I met him, he realized that to follow in the path of bringing the Moshiach, bringing the Messiah, he had to make friends with his Palestinian neighbors.
Was he open to be documented, or did you have to negotiate it? How open was it for the exposure?
He was very open. He was definitely liked the exposure. He was, in a way, he was a showman. I mean, there's a scene where he was on the steps of the mosque, and
right.
he loved that kind of work where he would connect with people directly like that.
But of course, when you're watching him and you're documenting him, you're documenting a lot of other parts of the conflict. Were they all open and happy to be shown? Some parts of the conflict, of course, are ones that aren't really happy to be on the camera.
Actually, at this point in time, we're not having any public screenings in Israel or Palestine for that reason.
For that reason.
Especially for the Palestinian characters, there's a lot of sensitivity and some danger maybe in exposure for them.
What was it about him that made the Palestinians listen to him?
Well, you saw in the little clip, I mean, the first thing he said to the crowd of 300 villagers was Allahu Akbar. He had an amazing way of connecting with people, whoever they were, on a heart level. And that's what, you know, I learned, one of the many things I learned from him.
During the filming process, he did become ill and he passed away. How did that impact you as a director? And also, how did it impact the documentary as a whole?
Well, he was diagnosed almost at the beginning of the documentary when we started to shoot. So he, you know, was sick every now and then, and it was clear that he was going to pass away at some point. It was very emotional. I think there's a scene where the night before he died in the movie, there's a scene with about 200 people in the backyard of his home chanting and singing in this, you know, amazing way. So it was very clear that
Yeah, so that something was about to change. It had to change now. I mean, you've Arya, you've been involved in this project as well. Maybe only the past few years. How has the experience of working on this documentary, vis-a-vis the way the conflict has evolved in these past few years, the way the Jewish settler movement has evolved in these past few years, how has that changed the documentary?
Well, how I became involved in this was I didn't have the chance to meet Rabbi Froman. I have a friend who was connected, Shaul David, and there was a tag mechir, a price tag attack that was carried out against an olive grove of a family that was living in the area. And I got a text message saying, we want to make an action of solidarity to show that we're here with our neighbors. And so I responded to that text message saying, I'm coming. And I went up the hill, and I had this really powerful experience of seeing the people who have followed in the vision of Rabbi Froman, meeting with their neighbors, showing solidarity, showing support, listening to what they need, and seeing how they can be neighbors, how they can be good neighbors, planting trees and participating in those kinds of actions.
And is this kind of solidarity and his legacy, if you will, does it still carry on today strong?
It definitely carries on strong, not in giant numbers, but there's actually an organization now that's started by Ali Abu Awad and Shaul Yudelman, who are both in the film. It's called Roots, and they have a little land now in Gush Etzion in the West Bank, and they welcome mainly visitors from overseas coming to, again, visit and sit with settlers and Palestinians together and experience that new thing.
So what are the plans for the film right now? It's finished, right? You've sealed the last few minutes of taping. What are you going to do with it?
Well, we're going to show it to the world, of course, as much as possible. There's a new tradition called impact screening, which is basically socially and politically aware films want to be shown to audiences not just in a passive way. So we already have some screenings lined up in the States and Europe in communities and institutions like synagogues and mosques, where we'll have a discussion afterwards, and we'll allow, you know, people to agree with this and disagree with that. And, you know, it's a very partisan issue. Israel-Palestine is a very partisan issue these days.
And the rabbi himself it could be seen almost as a controversial issue because he probably evokes many emotions from different people.
Exactly. No, exactly. And many Israelis say he was crazy.
So you're going to go towards Europe and the United States, and you're the impact producer, meaning you're going to look for those communities that are maybe this can impact the most?
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about the idea of where this is going, how this movement is growing, the idea of impact producing is this isn't just a film, this is a movement. You have the opportunity to participate. We're launching a Head Start campaign here in Israel to finish the final aspects of production and bring this to the various people around the world that we want to have participating in this movement. And so that's the idea is we have communities in France, in the UK, and in the United States that are very interested in engaging in this, but we also want to see people here in Israel also having opportunities to participate in this movement by participating in the Head Start funding and having screenings in their homes through that participation, and also becoming aware of the continuing movement with people like Ali Abu Awad and Shaul Yudelman,
and the
movements
movement,
like,
as you said. Harvey, do you, as a director and as I'm talking to you now as a complete individual, do you believe in this third way, or was this more of a phenomenon that you saw from the outside as a director?
I completely believe in this. One of the main simple things I learned from these 6 years was that face-to-face meetings between the two sides are completely necessary. They're not sufficient. I mean, you know, we're not going to solve the whole problem with a couple of meetings. But without face-to-face meetings, attitudes will not change. And that's what makes me so angry, briefly. You know, I'm kind of a political person, and when I see the governments here refusing even to meet each other, that drives me crazy. Rabbi Froman that's what he did. He went and, you know, met with a sheikh for 5 hours, and that was key to his work.
Well, you're doing a lot now through Impact Films and Impact Documentaries. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.